Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I hope you are doing well out there. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Automation Unplugged, brought to you by One Firefly. So today is Wednesday, 12:32 on January 24th, 2018. I hope you're having a great day, and I know that I am. I've actually been pretty into a fun research project with my wife in that our son goes to a particular school, and he's in the third grade, entering fourth grade soon, and we've been trying to deliberate and determine, do we keep him at that school or do we move him to another school? We're up to our eyeballs in school visits and tours. And so anyway, I was doing that this morning, and I'm fresh off of some of those interviews, and I'm here with you guys today. So we have a very exciting guest. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in now. We have the one and only David VanWert. How are you, sir?
Not too bad, Ron. How you doing?
I am doing good. Let me go ahead and check our Facebook, actually, and see if we are streaming. So bear with me here as I check our technology and see if it's cooperating. For those of you that have been with me for a little while on some of our shows, you'll know that sometimes it cooperates and sometimes it does not. Hey, and I know that I am. Oh, I hear some audio. I think he's killing that now. Busted.
Right.
I think David was checking it out too. So David is with VanWert Technology Design. And David, I've known you for, I want to say maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah, a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
Park though.
Since your DSI days, right?
Yeah, all the way back then. Yeah, that was about 10 years ago. So
10 years. So and you've been running VanWert Technology Design for the past 8+ years.
Correct.
And can you describe for our audience what is VanWert Technology Design, what type of business, and
Sure.
Then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so we're a design and consulting firm for all technologies throughout large estates and other projects. So we help with the overall design process for all types of technology, being AV, theaters, automation systems, lighting control, shades, security, the works, you name it. Kind of all of the things that during the design process of a home are kind of left not being developed during the design process with an architect or your other trades. So
you run to rephrase it, you run a consultancy helping homeowners or architects, and I want to peel the layers back as we go through this. But you help homeowners design and specify the technology for their homes and then make sure that it gets implemented correctly. Is that
correct? Yeah, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So how did you get started in the AV integration space? And is that what you call what we do? Is it AV integration? Is it home automation? What is it, and how did you get started here, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I like most people, I lump it into the AV integration. Sometimes people like that term, sometimes they don't. Most on the construction side of things, everyone kind of calls it just the AV guy, if you will. But yeah, I got started in the industry coming up on just about 20 years ago. Started working for Circuit City when I was a kid. Like a lot of us started in this industry and selling stereos and TVs back in the late 90s, and just really enjoyed being able to do that for a living. It's not a bad thing to be able to do. And throughout the years, just kind of worked my way up the ranks, through different integration firms. Went from Circuit City to a couple of different custom companies, and then 8 years ago saw this need. Saw a big hole in the design process when a client is building a new home. and decided to really jump headfirst into it and see where it took me. And here we are 8 years later. So
what were some of the holes or the needs that you felt existed in the marketplace? Why should a homeowner hire a technology consultant versus going to an integration firm that might be able to, some of them might argue, do the same thing? So
Sure.
what's the value proposition of hiring a firm like yours?
What I found, as you mentioned, 8-10 years ago, I was with the firm DSI Entertainment Systems, which at the time was, the 800-pound gorilla in Los Angeles. They had a vast majority of the business, had a huge company, everything else. And while I was with them in a design and sales capacity, I kept coming across, competitive bid situations to where you get brought onto a project. And with you're bidding against two other companies, and the typical MO of that is you get brought in by the contractor or the architect, and they'd say, okay, give us a proposal. And really that would be about the amount of detail you got. They'd say, we want speakers here, here, and here. We want TVs here, here, and here, and we want Wi-Fi throughout. And that was about the amount of detail that you got a lot of the time. And so what I found is that there would be all of these competitive bid situations that you would lose for no reason. That call it integrator XYZ would get the job because they're selling the same exact thing for 30% less or 40% less. But we all know that's never the case. And really, what I found is during the design process of a home. You have all of these trades or professionals that design a project, and then you have other professionals that execute a project. For instance, you have the architect that designs the home and designs the spaces. You have an electrical engineer. You have a mechanical engineer. You have a lighting designer. You have a landscape designer. You have an interior designer. All of these different professionals that design a system, and then it's executed by somebody else, whether that's the general contractor or the HVAC guy or the electrician, the list goes on and on. And I found, I said, okay, why is our industry, which is arguably the most complicated part of the house, done completely different? It's the only one of the trades in, the new construction business that's done design build typically only. To where everything else is done the opposite, and so that's what really kind of piqued my interest. And I said, okay, that doesn't make any sense, and so that's what gave me not really the idea, but kind of pushed me to do that. I bounced it off of some of my peers, other architects and contractors in the space, and they jumped at the idea, and so that's really what gave me that push those years ago. So.
No, I appreciate that. And David, I want to address our audience. If you're out there, thank you for watching. Please like the video. Please share the video. And maybe most important, please comment. So if you have questions for David and you want to hear him respond live, and by the way, Lewis, thanks for giving me feedback that the stream is working well. That's always good to hear. And hi to you and David. Luis Galvan says hello.
Hey, Luis, how you doing? Thanks for watching.
So if you're out there, please comment, like, share. It helps us spread the love, spread the good message out to the industry, and everybody wins. And again, if you have questions, we certainly want to field those questions. Now, David, in terms of interfacing with a customer that's hiring or engaging with a technology consultant, and I hear you that there certainly are a lot of examples of, if not all of the rest of the house, much of the rest of the house being led by a designer in some capacity, to then have that work in many cases done by others. How do you engage with them? Because I'm going to say maybe the field of doing technology consulting or design, there aren't, it's not as common as the architect or the interior designer. You and I were chatting offline about the number. It certainly seems like maybe there's less than 50 entities in North America doing this, maybe much less than that. So what is the process to simply engage them and help them understand why bringing a technology designer is the right answer? And then when they agree and you're on board, how do you go through the next steps? I mean, where do you start?
Sure. So yeah, and I found that using that analogy, because when a homeowner is first building, a home, it's a daunting process. There's a lot to know. There's a lot that they don't know, and technology is one of the major things that the entire design team, from the architect on down, it is mostly not their expertise, and so being able to really liken that analogy of you already have a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, a lighting designer. They're easily able to wrap their head around. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That there's this other missing hole of not only just the AV, but everything nowadays talks to each other. Being the AV, the automation system, the lighting control, the shades, the network, the security. Pool and spa control, all of the different things that you can integrate, now are all under one ecosystem. And having somebody that's able to think about those things early on and talk about, what the client wants to accomplish, how to integrate those things effectively throughout the home, and then do it much, much earlier. A lot of the times we're brought on very early in the design process, sometimes even before a general contractor is. Just so things like equipment room spaces and, conduit requirements and power requirements and all of the back end stuff can be thought about and budgeted early on. Things that typically don't happen till much, much later in the process. Most of the time, more often than not, AV, as a general term, isn't really thought about until framing, and so a lot of times clients and the rest of the team gets behind the eight ball on that stuff.
Is this a California thing? Is there a density of consultants in California? I know there's a number of well-known firms up in San Francisco. There's a good handful there in the LA, Orange County market. Is this an LA, California, or not LA, but a California thing, or are you seeing technology consultants emerging around the country?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's more concentrated in LA, probably just really due to the size and scope of the projects.
There's a lot of big projects in that market.
Yeah. I mean, you drive down any street in LA and there's a 10,000 plus square foot house going up on every corner. So there's definitely lots of business around here, and but yeah, I mean, I think across the country, you definitely have pockets of people that are starting to do this, and it's kind of a lot like a lighting designer. Many years ago, lighting designers didn't really exist, and homeowners or design team will say, oh, well, that's the electrician's job, but not the case anymore. I mean, I would say a vast majority of projects that we work on, have a lighting designer as well. So it's kind of along the same lines as that profession, and starting to definitely grow exponentially. 8 years ago, there was maybe 2 or 3 of us that I was aware of throughout the country, and now, like you said, they're definitely starting to pop up, and seeing a lot more of them throughout the country. So,
what is a typical deliverable from you? When a client's paying you under contract, what are you delivering? I mean, I'm going to make a guess. I'm assuming you're listening to them and helping them understand what's possible and balancing that with budget to design a specification of sorts and something perhaps that can be put out to bid for contractors. But what if you don't mind, what are some of the specifics?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so we go through, during the process and kind of the design development, we really talk to clients across the board with, all of these different technologies, from AV all the way through security and cameras and things of that nature, even things that your typical, AV integrator doesn't necessarily touch always. But we'll provide everything from, detailed floor plans, reflected ceiling plans, conduit requirements, interior elevations, section drawings. So really everything for the most part that not only brings a project together and makes it, easier to install, but then also creates a template or a platform for integrators to submit, true, call them apples to apples bids. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of, to clients, but then also to integrators is, I saw it myself on the other side, on the integration side, is there was never truly an apples to apples bid comparison. There was always something different, Control 4 versus Crestron and things like that. And, you were never really bidding from the same map, if you would. So having our deliverable that goes out to bid to integrators truly allows them to bid exactly the same thing, really based on what the client's needs are and, their budget and, all of that is developed, before an integrator even sees it. So it definitely helps to allow things to get much tighter and then allow all integrators to be on a level playing field, which in our experience, majority of them really like that fact that they're now bidding again, based on who they are and what their team is and not necessarily, who's the rock bottom price. How do you handle
manufacturer specification, right? So I'm just giving you an example. If you decide that you want a touch panel control system that can talk to lighting and shading and music systems, and a specification could be written around that. There's a number of choices of good control brands, good lighting brands, good shading brands, good audio brands. And a lot of times integrators, pick their horse or maybe a few horses they're going to ride, and that's their brand. Mm-hmm. But as a specifier or consultant, you really have your choice of everything. And so do you delineate preferences, or do you let the contractors bidding on a spec to delineate brand preferences?
So
I don't know if that's a tricky question or not, but I know for some it could be sensitive.
Yeah, no, not necessarily at all. I mean, and so a lot of the things are somewhat interchangeable. So from let's call a speaker specification just for distributed audio, maybe not necessarily for private theaters, but distributed audio, basic surround sound zones, things like that. A lot of that stuff, as long as you start with a base spec, throwing out a couple brands out there, whether it's, a Sonance speaker or an Origin acoustic speaker or, name a myriad of other brands. At the end of the day, as long as you're following that rough performance spec, they're fairly interchangeable. At the end of the day, does a client care if it's an Integra receiver or a Denon receiver? Probably not. Most homeowners have never heard of those different brands. But from a control system standpoint, that's one of the things where you definitely try and lock it in. And they all have their pros and cons, and so we do our best to run the client through the different options, what the different pros and cons are of the systems and allow them to decide. Because especially, the biggest one is Crestron versus Savant. That's always every single project. That's always the biggest sticking point and biggest point of communication.
Does your specification end up based on the result of you educating the customer? Is there a brand that is picked, and that brand and that product mix is what goes out to bid?
Absolutely. And so we detail, some other consulting firms that I'm aware of, do more of a high level spec. They'll call it, a touch screen interface, or a 6.5 inch speaker, and leave it kind of, for a lot of room for interpretation. I think the downside to that is opens the door for a lot of variation in terms of spec and budget. So we'll really fine tune it, and should the selection be Crestron, we'll say, location X gets a TSW 760, and get down to that granular of detail. And based on that, really based on the control system specification is how we'll kind of hone in on who the best fit might be. I mean, it have the benefit of a vast majority of your top dealers in Los Angeles and Orange County all support Crestron and Savant, so it never really becomes much of an issue. But, and integrators will ask, well, why do we select, brand A over brand B? and we'll say, typically there'll be a sticking point that a client says that'll really flip that, whether it's customization or template based, it really kind of helps drive that conversation.
So what is your read, or now that you've been at this for 8 years, you now have projects that have gone through your full cycle. Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, quite a few.
Well, now with the benefit of looking at those projects and knowing what projects look like without the technology consultant and what's your opinion on how they're different or better having gone through a process like yours?
Sure. So I think, the biggest benefits are going to be early on. From a design team standpoint, being the architect, the client, contractor, that standpoint, it allows someone to fill that hole without having to engage in an integrator quite that early. Like I said, a lot of the times that stuff gets thrown by the wayside, or it's just kind of a question mark throughout the early in the process. So it helps kind of fill that hole, fill in a lot of the questions from a design standpoint, requirement standpoint, and then also takes it off their plate. Normally a general contractor is required to do this, and like I said, it's not really their expertise. So in most cases, they're happy to have somebody that's able to not only develop a scope, a budget, and design requirements early on, but then also manage the bidding process and making sure things are apples to apples and everybody's on the same page. And then from an integrator standpoint, it's helpful for them early on, because then again, most of the time they're in a competitive bid situation, but it now allows them to showcase who the company is and not who's the lowest price, and they're not fighting against brands or different solutions. Client knows what they want, they know the budget that it should cost them, and it levels the playing field with all of that. So those are definitely the biggest benefits that we see.
Do you find yourself getting brought in by homeowners directly, or are architects bringing you into the table, or interior designers bringing you to the table? How's that dynamic working?
Our three largest referring partners, if you will, are definitely architects, contractors, and construction managers. Those are the three. We definitely get referrals from integrators as well as we'll have homeowners find us directly from time to time. But yeah, those are the top three.
Okay, and you are doing projects not just in LA, is that correct?
Yeah. Right now we've got current active projects, numerous projects in Hawaii, Florida. We have a big project going on. Just awarded a project in Saudi Arabia, so now we're kind of global, if you will. Just wrapped up one in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So yeah, lots of projects all over the map. So.
How do you support those projects that are outside of your backyard? Are you jumping on an airplane and visiting the job site? Are you doing it virtual? Are you doing this video conferencing?
It's a mixture of kind of all of them, really. The nice thing is that since during the design process, since we have this real detailed bid spec and the client knows what they want, they know the budget, we can now focus on who's going to be the best team for the project when it comes to an integrator. So who's going to do the best job, who's got the best track record, who might be the best fit personality-wise for the client. And so we're really able to pick, really good quality integrators and let them focus on what they do. And they, most of these integrators do a great job. And so once the project is awarded, there's not a whole lot of babysitting involved. It is at major milestones that, allows the client to feel good, to make sure that somebody is acting, as that high-level project manager, kind of checking in on things, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So yeah, in terms of remote projects, we'll visit at your major milestones being, pre-wire completion, maybe trim, and then final, to make sure that everything's working properly and it's really that last little 5% that can make or break a project. So it's just, pushing all the buttons and running everything through its paces to make sure it does what it does, and making sure that vision that, started 2 years prior actually is seen through. So
I would imagine you must have some dealers that are knocking your door down to make sure you know who they are and that they're on your list of people to potentially bid projects. Is that the case, and how do you handle that?
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, we tend to kind of fly under the radar a little bit, and in LA in particular, where a bulk of our business is, LA's it's obviously it's a huge town, but it's a very small community when you get to that level of integrator. So a majority of your projects all typically tend to get bid by the same pool of contractors, maybe 10 AV integrators, somewhere in that ballpark. And so, yeah, for the most part, everyone is well aware of who we are and what services we offer at that point. So, yeah, surprisingly enough, I don't get a lot of, call it cold calls from other integrators.
Maybe you will after this video.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to blame you if my phone starts ringing off the hook.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what is your read on the HTA and what Josh is doing over there Josh and his team are doing to really align the best-in-class integrators throughout North America and trying to make it easier for the design community and homeowners to know who they are?
I think it's great. I mean, it's a fantastic idea. I've definitely been monitoring that and keeping an eye on what Josh and the team are doing. And at least it's a very, call it 10,000 foot view of really what we do on our back end during the bid review process or integrator selection, really helps people just vet who's potentially bidding on a project. So off the bat, at least you're narrowing it down from, you take a market like LA, for example, that has literally hundreds of integrators, and really whittles it down to, knowing, okay, I've got, these, section of integrators that's already kind of passed the test, if you will. So at least it develops a boilerplate for integrators. So yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I definitely hope that that a lot of architects and just the design team is using that as a resource. I think it's great.
So if you don't mind, Josh, or sorry, not Josh, Josh from HTA, David. If you don't mind, we have an audience. Many of them are integrators, and so they are what you used to be an integrator, and now you have this vantage point as a consultant, so interacting with the end user and the design community in a little bit of a different fashion. What if any advice could you give to an integrator and in ways that you think they could perhaps focus areas of their business they could focus, or what could they do to maybe be just a little bit better or more attentive to the customer's needs?
Sure.
If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no, I think one thing that was very early on, it was really eye-opening, being on the other side of that coin. Architects and contractors were a lot more open, now that I wasn't selling them things. And from what I found out, the industry in general, had or has, depending what contractor you talk to, a pretty bad reputation. It's never smooth. There's always issues. It's always complicated. There's always problems. It's always a pain in the butt to bid properly. So really, I think that the biggest piece of advice is that, design development. It's tough, because from an integrator standpoint, and I struggled this when we were when I was on the integration side, is, do you charge for your design services and really insist that that's done before submitting a proposal. In order to get that documentation done, I've found that just helps things go so much smoother. And if there's plans to refer to, it just creates a template and a map again that just improves that level of coordination. I think that's the biggest problem, is that there's such little coordination. When there is coordination, it happens far too late in the process. So yeah, from an integrator standpoint, either improving upon or even offering it at all, just those design services to your clients, I think would be tremendously helpful. So
I agree. I've been standing on the soapbox, trying to help our industry see themselves as design-centric businesses, and thus they should be able to charge for their professional experience and knowledge that's worth money. And every other design trade interacting with that end user is charging a fee.
Yeah,
So
that's the thing, and you liken it, a lot to, an electrician. And if an electrician were to walk onto a job site or get invited to bid, he's going to say, okay, where's the electrical plans? He's never going to bid a job just kind of sight unseen with a homeowner or even a contractor saying, I need outlets here and here and here and here. I need downlights in these different locations. I need sconces. There's got to be specification for it, or else the bid's not going to be accurate. And it's
well,
really,
and every bid they get from contractor A, B, C are all going to be different, because the client or different members of the family told every different bidder different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that and I hear that from contractors constantly. You can easily, get swings in you can get 3 bids from different integrators, and I'll talk to them about the same thing, and you can get hundreds of thousands of dollars in swings in budget easily. I see it quite often.
Are you using any, or what are your opinions on some of the softwares out there to aid in discovery or budgeting? And I know that I'll just mention a couple that I'm aware of. There's the Sales Tools software from Mark and Susan Sipe.
Sure.
There's Slate Plan from the guys up there in San Francisco.
Yep.
So I'll name those 2. Do you use those, or are there other tools that you think you use, or you think integrators could be using in the kind of qualification stage of dialogue with a client?
Sure. So yeah, I definitely use I do use Sales Tools. Kind of in the first couple of meetings, we get brought on board. Played with the Slate Plan, but by that time I've already had Sales Tools in our resources, so that seemed to work well for me. But yeah, from an initial design development, when first talking to clients about scope and what they want to accomplish and all of that, one of the first things they say, okay, is how much is all of this stuff? And so Sales Tools has been great for within 10 to 15%. It's not concrete, but at least it's a good jumping off point to be able to really start to develop that budget, because you could talk about all this great stuff, and then it's, 2 or 3 times more than the client, even imagined it would be. And so it's nice to be able to scale that back, in those first couple of development meetings before you even put, pen to paper, if you will, to start laying things out. So.
Got it. Well, I appreciate you giving your opinion on that. David, if those watching would like to learn more about you and or your business, what are the best ways for people to reach out to you?
Sure. VanWert Design, across most of the socials, Instagram, VanWert Tech Design on Facebook here. You can visit our website. Contact information is right on there. Phone number, email, all of that great stuff. So yeah, feel free to reach out anytime. Always like hearing from different folks, and even integrators too. It's always nice to add additional resources. We definitely don't know every company out there, so it's great to hear about others for future projects. So,
well, David, congratulations on your continued success. I get to I have the fortune of having watched you from inception to I follow you on Facebook and I think Facebook and Instagram, and I see you gallivanting around the world and doing really cool things for cool people. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I truly am enjoying it. So.
And thank you for joining me on episode number 131 of Automation Unplugged. It was a lot of fun having you on.
Thanks for having me, Ron. I appreciate it. It's been great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to like this video, share it, give me some comments, although we're about to go off the air, so I'll reply to you offline. Or maybe I'll do it online. We'll see. But thanks again for watching another episode of Automation Unplugged. We have lots of awesome guests lined up. I think we're booked out a good number of months into the future here. So keep coming back for more. We'll keep trying to do it on Wednesday midday. And if we can't do that, we'll let you know in advance. And on that note, make it a great week. I appreciate you following us, and I'm going to bring up my end of show artwork, and there you see it. Visit us at onefirefly.com. You can give us a call, sign up for our newsletter, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much, everyone.